And so we are beyond grateful for the incredible talent that we are bringing you this evening. It is, for me, I was definitely a bookworm as a kid. And books were really my way of envisioning what my life could be and eventually what my life would become. It was my my greatest, access to the world of possibility. And it's true that you cannot be what you cannot see. And so we are incredibly gifted to have these amazing authors with us today who are going to share some of their stories. We're going to start with Richy Jackson, who is one of my heroes because I really love musical theater. And it was my dream as a child and then into my young adulthood to actually to be an actor on Broadway. And so the fact that you have, been a producer and that you produced Torch Song Trilogy on Broadway, I'm just like, oh my gosh, is that real? As well as, working on a lot of amazing television shows, including Nurse Jackie, which my partner and I were completely obsessed with. And then anything that John Cameron Mitchell does, of course, we are in love with. And so, yeah, we are so excited to bring the story and the presence of Richy Jackson to us right now.
So happy to be here. Thank you for having me. And I'm happy to see everyone, although I can't see everyone. But I hope you're all safe and sound and taking good care of yourselves. I'm not entirely sure where I look, but I'll guess there. I'm going to read from my new book, Gay Like Me, A Father Writes to His Son. And it is a letter from me to our 18-year-old son. My husband and I have 2 children. And when our older son was 15, he told us he was gay. And I was elated. I wanted him to be gay. I had hoped he'd be gay. It was my greatest wish. And then he said, Daddy, being gay is not a big deal. My generation doesn't think it's a big deal. And I thought, oh no, being gay is a really big deal. And I started to think about the things that I wanted to share with him about what it means to be a gay man. And then in 2016, Donald Trump was elected and brought with him to Washington Mike Pence, both more of an imminent threat to our son than ISIS and North Korea. Now I had to warn him about what it takes to be a gay man in America. And that was the impetus for the book. And so what I'm going to read to you tonight is the first chapter and then the prayer for our child at the end. So it's called Gay Like Me. And the entire book is written as a letter to my son. My son, the single dream and drive of my life has always been to be a father. I didn't have career goals, never fantasized about money or glory or fame. All I wanted was to catch a ball in the backyard with my son. I didn't desire power. I desired paternity. In 1984, when I was 18, I told my mother that I was gay and that I was going to be a father. I have always felt lucky to be gay. I've known since the 3rd grade that I was gay, and even then it made me feel special, unique, chosen. I still feel that way. It is the blessing of my life. Everything good that has happened to me is because I am gay. Everything I think, believe, crave, create, conquer comes from being gay. I've marched, stood silent vigil, protested, picketed, boycotted. I have spoken up, spoken out. I have buried friends. I have had relationships, created a family, had that family fractured, then recovered and rebuilt a new one. I am used to the highs, the lows, and the loves. I am familiar with progress and bitter setbacks. I can rejoice in celebrations and navigate danger. But none of this came easy, and the journey to this point was a long and difficult one. I was 17 years old when I moved to New York City in 1983 to attend New York University, right in the heart of Greenwich Village. right at the dawn of the AIDS epidemic. The early 1980s were a harrowing time to be gay. The entire world seemed to be lined up against us. A plague was ravaging us. A new group called the moral majority was demonizing us. Politicians used us as punching bags, and cardinals stigmatized us. There were very few laws to protect gay people. There were no out elected officials. There were no out movie stars. There was no visibility, no representation on TV. It was as if I joined a secret society, bound together by oppression, and we reveled in our clandestinity, even as we fought to assimilate. When Nurse Jackie, the television series I produced, ended in 2015, I had an idea for another television show that I wanted not only to produce, but to create. It would be about the differences between being gay when I was 17 and what it's like to be gay now. Growing older in the gay community has never been easy, but now there are many of us who find it hard to recognize the community we were born into. So I wrote plot lines to develop the story of how to reconcile our younger and older selves. I created the two primary characters, an older gay man named Guy, newly single at 62, who is a fish out of water in his own community. In my story, he finds himself roommates with a young 20-something gay man named Zach, who is new to New York City. Zach pushes Guy to date and go on Grindr. Guy gets Zach to lift his face out of his phone and teaches him how to street cruise. Just when I was putting this pitch together, you told Daddy Jordan and me you were gay. Suddenly, everything I was trying to make up was real and happening right at the dinner table. You and I stood looking at each other across that complicated divide. And now you are 18 and going off to college. Suddenly, it doesn't feel like just a comedy anymore. It's a drama with high stakes. Now, I write to you as a fellow member of the grand LGBTQ community in which we are both a part, as gay man to gay man. Daddy Jordan wasn't in our lives when you were born. It was 10 years into my relationship with BD when he and I had the life-changing conversation about having a baby. Sitting on the deck of a house on Fire Island, having just returned from a family vacation with our parents and our nieces and nephews, we felt the strong pull to start our journey to making our own family. When we were pregnant with you and your identical twin, I was in a state of elation and agitation. I was thrilled, but petrified that something would go wrong. Identical twins. I can still remember all the joyful faces of the people when we told them we were about to be fathers. The world had spun to a magical new place, and it was good, if frightening. Surrogacy and in vitro fertilization were so new, and I was so scared. On May 28, 2000, the phone rang at 11:30 p.m. I had been asleep for 2 hours. BD was visiting our surrogate, Shauna, in California. I picked up and he said he was rushing Shauna to the hospital as a precaution because she was having contractions. Your due date wasn't for another 3 months. He said he would call me back and he hung up. I waited hours. Finally, BD called. Our babies were boys, premature and fragile, and our firstborn son had died. We had to quickly name you both, deciding which of the family names we had chosen would be relegated to a grieving memory. Then he'd say he'd call when he had more news about you, and he hung up. I got on the phone with United Airlines to try to get the first flight out in the morning to Modesto. Your twin brother, our Boaz, died after 2 short hours of life, and you, at a frail 2 pounds and 13 ounces, were battling mightily to hold on to your own life. Your tiny body could fit into the palm of my hand. The first morning I saw you, the doctor told me that you would likely not make it, that you would probably die. I was sick with worry for you, and I mourned. I mourned your brother, mourned all that you had already lost, and I mourned my shattered expectations. I understand now that the reason it's called expecting when you are pregnant isn't only because you are expecting a baby. It's that the minute you hear the news, your expectations of what your child will be and what your life will be instantaneously coalesce. And over the next 9 months, or in our case, 6, you obsess and fantasize and plan for each part of the life you have envisioned. We had to airlift you to University of California, San Francisco Medical Center because it had a neonatal intensive care unit better able to care for you. Your first 3 months of life were spent in an incubator in the NICU, hooked up to a machine that helped you breathe. You were prodded and poked. Your tiny veins were so worn from intravenous needles that at one point they had to put an IV line into your head. Every day was an emotional roller coaster with the mounting medical news. He's going to be blind. He's going to be klutzy. He's going to need an operation. You were so sick and your life so precarious. At one critical point, you needed a blood transfusion. Because BD and I are gay, we were prohibited by US Food and Drug Administration regulations to be your blood donors. We had been parents for just 2 months. You were lying in an incubator, unable to breathe on your own, hooked up to a dozen wires, and because we were gay, we couldn't take care of you the way you needed to be taken care of, the way we had pledged to care for you. As I seethed, a stranger's blood coursed through your veins. Being prevented from giving you our blood wasn't a medical precaution. The doctors and staff knew that we were HIV negative. We had to be tested to do the surrogacy. It was a smackdown. A smackdown when we were already down. One son dead, one son in critical condition who may not survive. We were helpless, and we were made to feel even more helpless. We were being locked out as the IV in your tiny arm released that stranger's blood into your system. Just a few months old, and you were already confronted with gay prejudice. Now the FDA requirement is that gay men are not allowed to donate blood unless they have been celibate for 12 months. Now it's 3. We are not assessed individually, but as a group. And as a group, we are labeled a risk. The lifetime ban has ended, but the prejudice that gay men are diseased, unclean, still stands. During catastrophic crises, when the Red Cross sends out those calls for emergency blood donations, our patriotism and volunteerism call us to act, but we are denied. You survived and thrived, and we parented on. We flew back to Manhattan, your every breath aided by an oxygen tank as we took turns holding you in our arms. Your brother's ashes were in a cardboard box in our carry-on luggage placed under the seat in front of us. Neither of you was ever out of our sight. Your birth was an arduous effort that stretched across our unwelcoming country. In fact, your entry into this world, into this country, to being born an American, was consummated in homophobia. Because we, your intended parents, as surrogacy terminology calls it, are gay, we had to twist and bend and jump, hurdle after hurdle. Even though we lived in New York State, the only way you could be born into legality and legitimacy was in California, 2,912 miles away from our home. In 2000, paid surrogacy was not legal in New York State. and California was the only state where there was a judge who would allow two men's names to be on the birth certificate. Our caring carrier, an incredible young woman, lived in Modesto, California. Our home, New York City, with the best medical care in the world, was off limits to us. Your very existence, your health, your beating heart, your lungs breathing on their own, is a triumph over bigotry. You have shown from when you were a mighty 2 pounds, 13 ounces, that you have true grit. You are joining a great, vibrant community with many roads and paths ahead of you. The paths you choose and what you do along the way are entirely up to you. To build on the poet Mary Oliver, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious gay life? So I'm going to skip to the end, and the last chapter is called This Parent's Prayer, and it's my prayer for our son and really for all our children. I pray your life is full of love. I hope it includes activism. I expect you'll be of service. I hope too, through your buoyant colors you wear daily, that your life will have a vibrancy, especially now while you are young, that mine did not. I hope you'll try, and if you fail, try some more. I wish you to be loved the way I am. I want you to know the glory is in the doing, not in any reward, financial gain, or accolade. I want you to aim high, because if you aim for the middle, you will find it. Take time to think. There are no no-brainers. Crave responsibility. It is where the living is. Always want the ball. Be kind. Being kind is like warming up your voice before singing or stretching before an athletic activity. Being kind opens you up to be ready for anything, and being kind to people makes them feel valued. When you are ready for anything and valuing the people around you, the possibilities of what you can achieve are endless. Don't look down on anyone unless it's to help pick them up. Strive to be curious, not just capable. There is not a finite amount of success in the world. Be the student most likely to want everyone to succeed. In our loaded for bear world, where seemingly everyone has become a disciplinarian, teach, don't lecture, guide, don't demean, bolster, don't belittle. Honor your parents by being yourself and all of yourself, living fully and unapologetically. Comfort when needed and cause discomfort when required. Care for and about yourself. Care for your friends and your family. Care for our community. You are leaving home to join the greatest of odysseys, taking off on a magical and mysterious adventure. You are on the precipice where so many men before you stood. Jump. Jump as far and as wide as you can. Daddy Jordan and I are here watching you with utter wonder. That's it. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you so much as well. We have a few questions if you're able. Well, I have a couple, but we'll go to a viewer's question first. We heard from another person who is second generation. So they're queer, their parents are queer as well, and they want to know when the TV show with multiple generations of queer people is happening.
How about stay tuned?
Okay, all right, okay.
I do think, like you said when we started, our stories are really important because you want people to see themselves in books and in movies and in television shows. Visibility and representation really matter, and that's why I was excited to write the book that I needed when I was young, that our son desperately needed, and that so many of us are hungry for. So if it could have a life as something else, just to widen getting the ideas out there, would be very excited.
Yeah, yeah. So, I have a question about something you said before you even started reading, and that's, what election day 2016 meant for you. And the reason that really, is something that caught my attention is because, I was actually pregnant in November of 2016. And we had already decided to tell our sort of trans pregnancy story publicly at that time, because for us, it felt like we're on the brink of our first woman president. Like, there couldn't be a better time to really try to push forward a new and really empowering and positive story about queer families and trans possibility. And then when that happened, at first I thought like, oh no, what have I done? But then it seemed even more important.
Yeah, exactly.
To tell a story.
And parenting is more important. We were also pregnant during the election, and I kept saying this is a lousy time to bring a baby into this world. But then I realized the most hopeful act is to parent. That the most hopeful way to change the world is to parent. So it was a awful event, and I think we're seeing we're now all living through the consequences of 2016. But that's why we have to raise our children to be full of love, be full of kindness, be resilient, and to be
and
curious.
Understand science.
And what'd you say?
And understand science.
Exactly, or at least respect it.
Yeah. So I
was the same experience.
Yeah, it's just gutting. And so I think that it's also really inspirational to me to take that feeling of disappointment and disillusion and whatever else, that I want to put those words into your mouth, but that feeling, and then to turn around and say, okay, what can I do with this? How can I make an impact? So yeah, it was a difficult time for us all, and here we are. So then my final question for you, and I'll keep an eye on the audience questions as well. I feel that there's often this misconception or this fear or threat that somehow, as gay or queer or trans people, we're going to somehow psychically infer that onto our children.
If we could do that, I would bottle it and sell it.
And so what my question is, often that is, and I think less now, but certainly 10 years ago, and certainly 18 years ago, that was one of the threats that was wielded against us constantly.
Yeah.
And now here you are, and what I love is I have the same thing. I'm like, God, please let my kids be queer. Not just because it's a blessing, but also because I'll be able to relate to them in an even more intentional and deep way. So, how do you have any of those internal voices that are like, oh, this is like what people are saying might happen? Am I somehow strengthening that conversation by really embracing and talking about this more openly? How do you grapple with that?
I know that I'm conservative's worst nightmare, because I say I wanted our son to be gay. I had hoped he'd be gay. And, first of all, I think being gay is a gift. It is a blessing. We are only 4.5% of the population. That's not like, oh, we all just this little group of people came out wrong. We are, in fact, chosen to see the world differently, to look at things differently. That's a blessing if we don't diminish it in ourselves, if we don't scrub it off. And think about what LGBTQ people go through. We are disappointments to our parents. We're at battle with our government. We're stigmatized by religions. We're bullied in our childhoods. We're erased in our classrooms. We have survived a plague, and still we rise, come out, and say, "This is me." That's the spirit of an extraordinary species of people. Why would we not want our children to be extraordinary and part of this incredibly vibrant community? And so I wanted my son to be gifted the way I was, but also, how could you parent with any self-esteem if every day you prayed your child would be nothing like you? I wouldn't be able to parent if I was praying, "Please don't be like me. Please don't be like me." It's the blessing of my life. I wanted that for him. And if conservatives, if that brings their ire up, bring it on. But my working title of my book was The Gay Agenda.
Nice. Well, I love Gay Like Me. I would have loved the gay agenda too. And I think, if there's anything that the generations of queer people have learned, it's that we cannot live our lives from the perspective or, trying to impress people who have no interest in seeing us as
No,
human.
exactly. And here's the thing about parenting, right? And it's a covenant. When you parent, you expect when your child is out in the world, not with you, that other adults will take care of them for you, either in the playground or at school or at churches. And with LGBTQ kids, the covenant is broken, often with their parents or by our government, by religions. And what us LGBTQ elders have to do is bring our LGBTQ youth in, surround them with community so that we can lift them up, unleash their gifts, and unleash their potential. We restore the covenant. That's our responsibility as LGBTQ elders. And that's the other impetus for the book.
Great. Well, thank you so much. It was such a gift to get to share this time with you. Tell us how we can support your book.
So the book is available where all books are sold. Now's a good time to support independent bookstores. So you could go on IndieBound, put your zip code in, and find the local bookstore near you and order the book from a local bookstore, or it's available online at Amazon and Barnes & Nobles.
And Powell's.com, because I'm from Portland, of course. I'm pro Powell's.
Amazing, Powell. Yeah, I would love to have visited there, but
I know, here we are.
I would love people to buy the book, join me in this urgent conversation about our LGBTQ community. I look forward to hearing from everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much. And stick around too, because we may have time at the end still for some more questions if people have them.
I want to hear Steve.
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited to bring our second reader, Steve Disselhorst, to you all. It's interesting to hear and to read Steve's bio because in some ways it's quite similar to what we just heard from Richie, that there was this very early on desire and drive and dream to be a parent. And so I really love that, both of you really have that in your DNA. I don't at all. I never wanted to be a parent until I met my partner. And then I was like, oh, okay, I could do this. So I always love to hear from people who always had that vision for themselves. And Steve's book is called Determined to be Dad, a journey of faith, resilience, and love. And Steve is in the Bay Area and is the co-chair of Our Family Coalition and is actually on the board of supervisors to the San Mateo County LGBTQ Commission and a speaker for the San Francisco LGBTQ Speakers Bureau, and does diversity and inclusion work. So I'm just really excited to hear from you and to hear your voice and to hear from your forthcoming book.
So thank you. I am so excited to get this into the world. And this week is special to me and my family. Today is actually my daughter's 8th birthday. And this week holds so many memories. So when we connected about this giving back to the community through doing this book reading this week, I was so excited. And then we actually moved to the date of my daughter's birth. I was like, this is just meant to be. And my goal with writing this book is really to share the experience that I've had of coming out, leading a life of honesty and truth, and really with always this strong desire to be a parent. From the earliest memories of my childhood, I always envisioned being a dad and having a son or daughter in my lap, helping and teaching them and growing and learning myself as a parent. And so that's always been there for me. And then when I went through the process, my husband and I adopted our two children. When we went through the process, we got a lot of technical information about what we needed to do, but we weren't really prepared for the emotional journey that happened with both of our children, the ups and downs and the challenges that we faced to bring these two amazing children into our family. And so I really wanted to share this book as a way to help others, the other LGBTQ people in the United States, but really across the world, to help them know that it's a goal that is obtainable, and it's challenging, but I wanted to share my experiences so I could help others during their dark moments through this process, because there are, as you heard from Richie, there are difficult and challenging moments as we create our families. So today I'm going to start actually midway through the book. I'm going to read chapter 14. And it's so appropriate. I wrote this chapter. It's titled Easter Week Gift. Easter Sunday was quickly approaching. We made plans with my husband's family to celebrate Easter, and we had brunch. We expressed our sorrow about not being able to find our child, and we expressed our dismay about what we were doing. I remember this Easter Sunday brunch like it was yesterday. I felt sad and hopeless. I thought that the dream of being parents was out of our reach. I had lost hope that we would find our child and become parents. And then we had our big break. On the day after Easter in 2012, we received a phone call from our adoption agency, the Independent Adoption Connection, and our placement social worker, Karen, told us that there was a family in LA that was considering adoption and wanted to talk to us. We were ecstatic and excited about the possibility of finding our child, and scared that this would turn out to be another false promise. Karen gave us the birth father's phone number. I remember going into a closed office at work, shutting the door and thinking to myself, I hope and I pray that this will work out for us. In the back of my mind, I kept saying to myself, I can't go on much longer, trying to keep hope alive and not ending up with a child. I picked up the phone and I dialed the number. The phone rang a bit. My stomach was tied in knots. My hands were clammy and my heart was beating fast. On the other end of the line, someone picked up, and it was a man. We said hello and we started the conversation. I was surprised to be talking to a man. Justin had a warm and friendly voice. I could tell that he was nervous, and so was I. Over the last 2 years of our long journey, with every new situation, we had always started with birth mothers, and we never started our interactions with birth fathers. Justin and I had a friendly, brief conversation. We talked about why they considered adoption, the birth mother's pregnancy, and their current family situations. I felt cautiously optimistic and relieved that the call was behind me. I immediately called my husband, Lorvik, and shared every detail. That evening, we talked some more, and we were more excited. The next day, Justin and I spoke again. We had another great conversation, and this time it felt more natural and trusting. This situation was so different than every other interaction we had in the past. I felt a greater sense of connection and familiarity. Lorvik had a conversation with Justin, and we both felt good about our interactions. After 3 days of having multiple phone conversations with Justin, we never talked with the birth mother, and this made us uneasy. Finally, Karen, our social worker, suggested that we go to Los Angeles and try and meet the birth parents. We were freaking out and hopeful and fearful at the same time. During this week, we leaned on each other often. We had been through this process so many times, and we no longer knew what was real. We couldn't believe that we were finally about to meet the birth parents. It had been such a long road, and we grew so cynical. What was happening? Was there a real connection between us? Would they meet us? Would we feel nothing? Would they feel nothing? Would the reality of an open adoption be too much for us to handle, or too much for them to handle? All of these questions were swirling around in our heads and our hearts. We drove to LA on a Thursday after work. We arrived at about 2 in the morning, and on Friday morning at noon, we met with the birth parents for the first time. We had never spoken with the birth mother over the phone, and quite frankly, weren't sure what to expect. A social worker from the LA office of our adoption agency came to the meeting for introductions and to facilitate the conversation. Over the first 2 hours, the social worker helped us with high-level questions to get us all comfortable with each other and break the ice. The birth mother's name was Lila. Since Lila did not have prenatal care, she was unsure of her exact due date, but she thought she was about 8 months pregnant, and she knew she was having a girl. Lila and Justin had been in a committed relationship for the last 4 years and had one other child together, who was about 3 years old. Lila also had 2 other children from an earlier marriage. The LA-based social worker needed to leave to handle other responsibilities. We were alone with Justin and Lila, and over the next 3 hours, our conversation went more in depth. We talked about everything under the sun, including each of our histories as individuals, then as couples. We felt such a strong connection with them. At the end of almost 5 hours together, Justin and Lila turned to us and asked if we would like to adopt their daughter, and we immediately said yes. In open adoption lingo, this means we match with each other. Both birth parents and adoptive parents decided they liked each other and wanted to create an open relationship for the future. We had a magical 5 hours with them, and we felt completely connected. After matching, the birth parents asked us if we'd like to come with them to see an ultrasound the next day and see their child. We were beyond excited. Everything was becoming very real. Afterward, Lorvik and I went to dinner and talked about every aspect of our conversation. We replayed every detail, and everything felt light. We were giddy. We ordered a couple glasses of red wine and had a lovely meal celebrating our match with Justin and Lila. We went back to our hotel and tried to rest, but we slept very little. We were too excited. We tossed and turned, thinking about the little girl in Lila's belly who we would see tomorrow. The next day, we met Lila, Justin, and their son. We saw the ultrasound, and for the first time, we saw our daughter inside her birth mother's stomach. We were so happy, exhilarated, and we couldn't wait to meet her. In the ultrasound, she was curled up, and it looked like she was sucking her thumb. While we felt 100% certain that this was our birth family, we were also scared that it would not work out. Later that evening, we met Lila and Justin for dinner at Buco de Beppo in Redondo Beach. We continued to build a trusting, loving, and fulfilling relationship with them. It was a great evening. The stress of the match and the ultrasound were behind us. We were able to relax and connect with them on a deeper level. We were no longer talking to each other with the nervousness of making a decision about matching. We were entering into a new phase of the relationship. In some ways, it felt like we were all the parents or extended family talking about the baby's future in such a caring, loving manner. It no longer felt like we were strangers, and our relationship became very intimate. As I wrote this paragraph 7 years after that dinner, tears streamed down my face as I thought about this special relationship. It is a relationship like any other relationship in my life. We have so much gratitude and love for Lila and Justin. Despite all the uncertainty, we fell in love with them and we're so ready for the next steps. But looking back on our long journey and each birth mother holistically, each one was on their own odyssey to get to their big decision. It all started with a realization of where they were at in their lives and whether or not they could give their child the experience that they wanted and deserved. They were steeling themselves to make the ultimate sacrifice, making the hardest decision they would ever make in their lives. From the young woman who was in college but missed her period to the 49-year-old grandmother with 5 children, these women and men were willing to give us the greatest gift in the world. Freely and wholeheartedly. It's a constant reminder that birth moms and birth dads are to be cherished and to remind our children where they came from and why they are so special. And maybe all this waiting is by design. Maybe there's a lesson to be learned or relearned, not just for us, but for our children. Maybe good things come to those who wait. I wholeheartedly believe what they say about adoptions, that you get the child you were always meant to get. I know it's true for us. At the time, our daughter was the best thing that ever happened to us. And today we can also include our son as one of the best things to happen to our family. So that chapter, just reading it at this time, just brings me back to those feelings so intensely. And I'm just so pleased to be here to share with the audience and with you, and the gift of life, the gift of relationships, the gift of trust that we experience. Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. Having been through an adoption process myself, you know, it is like I'm having flashbacks while you're talking about it. The feeling of just like fear and worry, and what if it doesn't work out? And so much of your fate and your future is in the hands of someone else. And in our
Yes.
case, it was in the hands of our children's biological parents, and also the court systems, and also social workers, and all the investigators and judges, and all of those things. And it is harrowing to live in that space of not knowing what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But now I imagine it's great to be on the other side where you do know what happened, and you know, there's the comfort of knowing that things did happen as they should have.
Yep.
And that's, you know, that's my first question for you. You know, the word faith is actually in the title of your book.
Yes.
And I know, you know, a lot of parents who are very different from me tell their children, when they ask, where do babies come from? Often people will say, well, you know, God decides. God gives a baby to a couple when they're ready or whatever. And so I'm wondering, you know, with faith in the title of your book, where do you believe the sacred or the divine, how do you believe it manifests itself in these stories of adoption and foster care? And like, where do you see that the thread of divinity come through in those different and unique ways?
I mean, so, you know, faith is a really strong part of my being. I grew up Catholic in the Midwest, and it's still to this day is a very important part of my life. I think for us, you know, we had interactions with 14 women before we actually, our daughter came into our lives 8 years ago. And it was really faith in knowing that this this idea of being a dad was something that I was sort of premeditated. So it was premeditated in me. It felt like it was part of my genetic makeup from the beginning of being a parent. And I think that, so I'll just tell you a story about my family. So, and this is around faith and the spiritual connection. Is I'm the youngest of four. My husband's the youngest of four, and both of our children that are adopted are the youngest of four. And this connection, and we're a family of four, so it's like there is this predetermined connection. And with my daughter's birth family, it was an open adoption. My son, on the other hand, was through the county, very different circumstances. But when we finally met the family for my daughter, that are her birth parents, some of the things that we both held dear were so important to her birth mother and to me and my husband that it was just like there was just this magicalness about that. And so I think that these connections with our children are predetermined, and they are whatever your belief system is, that there is the work of God. In my case, I would say God, the hand of God in these interactions that bring these children into our lives. So
Yeah, I mean, I always tell, because I work with hundreds of prospective parents all over the country, and I always tell them, you know, hold tight to your vision of having a family and being a parent, but hold lightly to how you get there. Yeah. Because you have to make room for the mystery. You know, you have to make room for the twists and turns, or if you believe in predetermination, you have to leave space for things to unfold as they are going to. Because sometimes, you know, you imagine it's going to go a certain way, and then as happened with my partner and I, we became parents overnight, you know, to his niece and nephew. And we would have never, whoever plans for that? And yet it was exactly right and perfect. You know, we are who they needed to be their parents, and they are who we needed to learn important lessons for us as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And someone is asking, you know, how did you, because we heard, you know, a surrogacy story and an adoption story, and I'd actually love to bring Richie back into this conversation. You know, a common question, how do you decide if adoption is the right path for you, if surrogacy is the right path for you? How, you know, how do you figure out what's going to be right for you and your family? What's your decision-making matrix there? Maybe Steve, you go first, and I'd love to ask Richie the same.
Yes, I think for my husband and I, when we thought long and hard about both options, for my husband and I, we didn't feel a strong connection to our genetics. We felt, my husband, you know, we come from very different backgrounds and, you know, very different experiences. And in my case, I'm the youngest of four. I have two brothers, and with many nieces and nephews, I didn't necessarily feel this strong connection to my genetics. And so when we thought about that, we both felt that. We looked at surrogacy. We looked at, and we thought seriously about surrogacy because we felt that there was more certainty in it, which I don't, now that I've listened to the stories of, you know, many parents who've gone through surrogacy, I think that it was a fallacy. But at the time when it felt more controllable. As my husband and I are both in corporate jobs, it felt like, let's go down a more controllable route. But in the end, I think both routes are challenging and messy, different, very different. But again, it came for me and my husband back to faith. We felt like this was the route of the way that we were called to be a family. So that was really a big part of our decision-making matrix.
Cool. Yeah. So Richie, how did you and BD make that decision?
Well, first, I'm the youngest of four. So
what our viewers don't know is they actually had to change outfits because they were wearing matching outfits. So this very surreal.
So what BD and I were open to we were open to any avenue that would create our family. But just as we were beginning to start to think about it, we read this article in the New York Times about this new surrogacy agency that was catering to gay people. And we started to explore surrogacy because of that article. And we had the blessing that my sister, one of my sisters donated her egg. So that it felt like the right, it just felt like destined because she was really excited to be part of our journey. And so it really, had she not said yes, we might have taken a different route.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and, I have 2 adopted children. I have 1 biological child. And, I hate to say it, but there's nothing magical about a baby sharing your DNA. There isn't. If it happens to be the easiest or most straightforward, or it makes you feel more empowered because you have a little more control, if it works for you, that's perfect. And
yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, and the child that you're supposed to parent is the child you're supposed to parent. And you, I mean, can you imagine, Richie, if you would love your son anymore if you had been the sperm donor?
Right. So I've not been twice. I've not been and that was not important to me.
Yeah.
But I actually feel more parented by our children than actually parenting them. So I'm more on the receiving end of the lessons.
Yeah.
Yeah. Early on, I would often get frustrated with my kids and talk to my mom, and she would say, you just have to look at them and you just have to literally say out loud, thank you for the lesson that you are giving me today.
When our older son was 5, I asked him not to do something, and he said, "Your job is to take care of me, not control me." and I did what your mother said. I said, "You're right. Thank you very much."
Oh my God, that is, wow.
I thought he's going to be fine.
He's going to be fine. There are some kids that are more like clay that you can shape, and then there are kids who are like bowling balls, and you're just the guardrails, and you just keep them from dying, and then they are fully formed. And I have one of each of the olders, and I can't tell about the younger yet. But yeah, and I also can't help but think, one of the most profound moments of my sort of whole parenting journey happened after the kids came to live with us. And I actually remember I was in Houston, Texas, and I was working on a trans event. I was emceeing it, and we were setting up the chairs, and there was a gay man who was at least, probably I would say, a generation above me, right? So he like late 50s, early 60s. And he's like, oh, so tell me your story. And we were talking, and then I was like, oh, this is so selfish. I'm saying all these things about being a parent, and I should ask him a question too, and so I said, tell me about your story. Did you ever have children? And his eyes just literally welled up with tears, and he said, oh, honey, I never could have done that.
Yeah.
And how lucky are we? How privileged? What a gift it is to be alive when we are today, or to have lived long enough to be able to do this thing and to have this core part of human existence that so many of our predecessors either never lived to see or were simply born too early to ever experience. And I just think it's so powerful, and it's such a blessing to be alive now.
In so many parts of the world right now where that's not possible, right? So that's the other thing about these books and getting out there and telling our stories, is to bring hope to other places where there's darkness for our community, so others can aspire.
Yeah, let's not forget that the Trump administration and state legislatures are trying to prevent us from being foster parents and adoptive parents. So while we do have the ability to be parents, we are still facing obstacles and state governments that are trying to block us, and it takes vigilance and a lot of our activism to fight back.
That's right. Constant vigilance. It is not a forward motion that happens magically. It is powered by all of us working hard and putting our heart and souls into it when we can, and then taking a break and allowing others to lead when they feel called as well. And I'm so proud to be part of Family Equality, who's doing that work on the front lines. I mean, while the pandemic has been happening, state governments have been taking advantage of it to pass anti-trans legislation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's right. So I just thank you both so much for being with us today.
With you.
That's right, and what a blessing to spend this time with you both.
Can I just say we didn't talk about how we can all buy Steve's book?
Oh my gosh, Steve, yes, tell us, how can we support your
I
book?
appreciate that plug. So this is actually my first reading. My book will be available on June 16th. And it'll be available at all retailers. Right now, you can go to Determined to Be Dad. You can sign up to get more information. And so I'm also really excited. I'm working with a publisher, Publisher Purpose Press, which is a small LGBTQ publisher in Connecticut, working with voices like mine to get our stories out. So really excited for that. Thank you so much, Richie. I am thrilled to have the endorsement of Stan from Family Equality as one of my endorsements. So thank you very much.
Of course, and we'll everyone who registered will get a follow-up email that reminds them to go to each of your websites to buy each of your books, or pre-order in Steve's case if that's an option. And also you'll get to a link to our online calendar of events. We're doing a lot of events like this. Andrew Solomon will be joining us next week for a reading and Q&A, and he's the author of Far from the Tree and The Noonday Demon and a bunch of other books that my mother got me hooked on. She just can't believe that I know Andrew. And lots of other events just like this. So please come back. Thank you so much to Steve and Richie. And yeah, have a wonderful.
Everybody.
Yes, you too. Bye, everyone.
Nice to meet you both. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.